Hey, we're going to continue with Nahum, chapter 2. But before we get started in that, I wanted to share something that I ran across this week, which really surprised me. Remember, I had told you that one of my professors in seminary described Christ as like God was like a slide projector. It would just white light on the screen, no definition. And that there were a series of slides that can be put in that projector. One's Buddha, one's Muhammad, all of the great religions. And God is defined through those. But there's also a slide called Jesus. And we believe as Christians that that slide more clearly identifies God, that image is more clear. And I know that some people have a hard time. We had a member of the Bible study who's not coming anymore, who was, I think, offended by that description and said, Scripture is very clear, unless you accept Jesus Christ, you're done. Well, somebody had posted on Facebook this week, and if it was on Facebook, you know it was true.
Okay.
But it says, Pope Francis to children in Singapore. Apparently this is on one of his tours. All religions are paths to reach God. They are, to make a comparison, like different languages, different dialects, to get you there. But God is God for everyone. If you start to fight saying, my religion is more important than yours, mine is true, and yours isn't, where will this lead us? There is only one God, and each of us has a language to arrive at God. Some are Sikh, Muslim, Hindu, Christians. They are different ways to God.
That's a good statement.
Oh, I love that. And from the Pope.
Yes, I was going to say, I didn't know I could appeal to a higher authority than my seminary professor. But I do think the Pope trumps my seminary professor.
Listen to what she has to say about that. Please
No,
say it. Come on, say it.
Oh, I just said that's one of the reasons the American bishops hate him.
Yeah,
Because he's much more
much more liberal.
ecumenical.
Yeah, and ecumenical, yes. And see,
The Pope got it right.
Well, I think he did.
I really thought about this more this week because of the guys we've been reading, these minor prophets. Now remember, we've been talking about Nineveh, the last couple of prophets.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when God told Jonah, go to Nineveh. And Jonah said, nah, my ex-in-laws live up there with my ex-wife. I don't want to go to Nineveh. So he got on a boat. Storm came up. They threw him off the boat. A whale swallowed him. He got spit up on the shore. And while he was laying on the shore, the first thing God said to him was, Jonah, go to Nineveh. and so he went to Nineveh. And he prophesied there. And what did the people of Nineveh do?
They repented.
They repented, and they were saved. And Jonah wasn't happy about that. But, we think, why is God concerned about the people of Nineveh? God's concerned about all people. And Nineveh was conquered by the Babylonians. Well, God used the Babylonians to wipe out Nineveh. But he also used a few other countries to wipe out Israel, northern kingdom, southern kingdom. And God said, after that, you'll be able to go back home. But God really, I don't think, and boy, I could be wrong, and surely I very well may be, if you want to dispute the beliefs of a seminary-trained 52-year minister, you're welcome to do that. But I really think that God loved the Ninevans. He loved the Babylonians. I mean, God loved all these people. Now, they all didn't worship God, but they had their own gods, and that upset God Yahweh quite a bit. But here we have Nahum, whose name means comfort, is prophesying to Nineveh. And as he starts off, he says, "The Lord is a jealous and avenging God. The Lord takes vengeance and is filled with wrath. The Lord takes vengeance on his foes and vents his wrath against his enemies." That doesn't mean he hates the Ninevehans. He just isn't happy with the way they're now acting. So, I think it's really important as we read some of these prophecies, who is God really angry at? He's angry at his people. I mean, he came down to the Israelites and did more for them than he did for any other people. And yet they kept turning their back on him. That made him even more upset than these other people who may not have followed God. So anyway, I thought this was very important.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was interesting because you don't hear people talk about the sheiks very often, but that is one of the great world religions. And, we've all heard of the Hindus, the Muslims. But it's important to remember that God is a God of the world. He created the whole world. And he just said, but I only love this part of it. It may be God, if we look at God as the Father, it'd be like parents in a family that has a large family, 8 kids. I had a good friend, he was one of 12.
Okay.
And he said, what we had was 3 different families. The 3 oldest,
Mm-hmm.
they kind of hung out together, and the next 3, we had our own families. But if you ask a parent, which one do you love the best? That's a hard choice. I had one child, so I always loved her best. But I was thinking, if I had 5 or 6 kids, like some of my friends, and you said, who do you love best? My response would be, what day of the week is it?
For 1 hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, what hour is it?
Or what age are they?
Yeah, what age? As the report cards come out. So it's for us to assume that God hates the people of Nineveh or the Babylonians. I think we make a big mistake, because God is a big God of the whole world. And, God loves everyone. Not so sure about the Missouri Synod Lutherans.
There's time for them. Maybe he's just waiting.
Yeah. He probably loves them too. Not as much as he loves the Episcopalians and the ELCA Lutherans.
But it's interesting, as much as Baal comes up in these, that it seems at the end of one of those chapters there was tolerance for even Baal.
Yeah. God, I think it's in the last prophet in Micah. God was saying, well, you can have your Baal, but remember, I'm the big cheese. Baal answers to me, because all of those other gods were made up. They came out of someone's mind.
Well, how did ours come up?
Well, he appeared. Remember, he appeared to Moses on the mountain.
But none of their gods came to visit.
No, I don't. I'm not an expert on all those religions, but none of the other gods made an appearance like.
Well, I thought there's one Muslim, and I don't know who, but there's a real guy.
Well, Hindus have incarnations, people they consider incarnations.
Yeah,
Mohammed? Maybe?
Yeah, that's what I
Mohammed.
was thinking.
but Muhammad is part of the Judeo-Christian tradition.
Yeah, the three evils of the Bible.
Yeah,
That's how the Muslims think of it.
Yeah,
The three people in the Bible, Christians, them, and Jews.
Yeah.
Were the
Well,
people in the Bible.
they say Christians, them, Jews. They don't talk real loud about that, but they come from that Hebraic background.
Well, even today, they're still trying to destroy Israel.
Oh yeah, but that's human nature more than I think that's less religion and more
More just
greed.
whatever.
Yeah. So
Can't seem to avoid war.
yeah,
Way back, or
yeah.
Well, first this one's attacking one, and then the other one attacks, and
Hell, Israel wiped out the leader of Hezbollah.
yeah.
And Hamas.
Well, Hezbollah, but Hezbollah has elected a new leader, and the Israel general said that's a short-term position.
So did he get his cell phone out of the same cabinet that the other guy or something?
I don't know, but when I read that in the paper this morning, I thought, no matter where you are in the war, you got to admit that's funny. I mean, it's tragic, but it is kind of funny. We just look at that as a temporary position.
You ask about the parent which loves which child the best. Probably the better question would be which child loves the parent best.
Yeah.
really.
And again, the advantage of
cycles too.
the advantage of having one child. And it got easier when her mother and I got divorced and she lived with me.
Yeah, there you
I got the props. So let's take a look at Nahum,
Chapter 2.
chapter 2.
Verse 1.
An attacker advances against you, Nineveh. Guard the fortress, watch the road, brace yourselves, marshal all your strength. The Lord will restore the splendor of Jacob like the splendor of Israel, though destroyers have laid them waste and have ruined their vines. The shields of his soldiers are red, the warriors are clad in scarlet. The metal on the chariots flashes on the day they are made ready. The spears of pine are brandished. The chariots storm through the streets, rushing back and forth through the squares. They look like flaming torches. They dart about like lightning. He summons his picked troops, yet they stumble on their way. They dash to the city wall. The protective shield is put in place. The river gates are thrown open, and the palace collapses. It is decreed that the city be exiled and carried away. Its slave girls moan like doves and beat upon their breasts. Nineveh is like a pool, and its water is draining away. Stop, stop, they cry, but no one turns back. Plunder the silver, plunder the gold. The supply is endless, the wealth from all its treasures. She is pillaged, plundered, stripped. Hearts melt, knees give way, bodies tremble, every face grows pale. Where now is the lion's den, the place where they fed their young, where the lion and lioness went, and the cubs with nothing to fear? The lion killed enough for his cubs and strangled the prey for his mate, filling his lairs with the kill and his dens with the prey. I am against you, declares the Lord Almighty. I will burn up your chariots in smoke, and the sword will devour your young lions. I will leave you no prey on the earth. The voices of your messengers will no longer be heard.
Okay. This is in reference to when the Medes and the Babylonians conquered Nineveh. Nineveh was quite a popular city. It was a walled city in the northern part of the territory, and was really the place where people would want to go. It's sort of they didn't have gambling, but I would say it's sort of like the Las Vegas of the area. I mean, people wanted to go there because there was a lot of shows, a lot of music, a lot of trade. And so when this prophecy comes down that says, you know, your soldiers are clad in scarlet, but they're gonna get wiped out, and they'll be destroyed.
The message says, no more victories to announce. You're out of war work forever.
Yes, that's right.
Wish we could get out of here.
Yeah. Yes, they are simply just shut down. So let's move on to chapter 3.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
The Ninevites, were they like Assyrians, or who were they, besides just the Ninevites?
Well, they were Assyrian. Nineveh was in Assyria.
Okay.
It was the capital, I think.
Yeah.
Three.
Yeah, it was the capital.
Nineveh was the
You're
capital
ahead of us.
of Assyria.
Nineveh was the capital of Assyria.
Trouble following what she
Oh,
did.
okay, thank you.
And it was
That
in
helps.
the northern part of the Assyrian kingdom,
All right.
which is in what today is Iran, that area.
No wonder I can't find it on this Palestine
Oh,
map.
Yeah.
Be there.
It'd be up over here somewhere.
But it was, I want to say, I guess if I were living in that time, Nineveh is one of the cities you need to meet, you need to go to. I mean, it was very popular. And, their people were pretty decent, although the Lord used them to conquer the northern kingdom. So, but Assyria was always, I liked Assyria because of the way it's spelled. I think the spelling is kind of interesting. So woe to Nineveh, chapter 3.
There's a note in my Bible on chapter 2, and it says, one Assyrian king boasted of erecting a pyramid of chopped off heads in front of an enemy's city.
Oh, my.
Yeah, they were conquerors.
Yeah, they were pretty vicious conquerors.
Yeah.
Okay. Woe to the city of blood, full of lies, full of plunder, narrow without victims. The crack of whips, the clatter of wheels, galloping horses and jolting chariots, charging cavalry, flashing swords and glittering spears. Many casualties, piles of dead, bodies without number, people stumbling over the corpses, all because of the wanton lust of a harlot, alluring the mistress of sorceries who enslaved nations by her prostitution and peoples by her witchcraft. I am against you, declares the Lord Almighty. I will lift your skirts over your face. I will show the nations your nakedness and the kingdoms your shame. I will pelt you with filth. I will treat you with contempt and make you a spectacle. All who see you will flee from you and say, Nineveh is in ruins. Who will mourn for her? Where can I find anyone to comfort you?
Let's pause there for just a minute. This is the same city that God sent Jonah
Yeah.
to save. And now he's saying, the crack of the whip, clatter of wheels, gallop of horse, charging cavalry, flashing sword, many casualties, piles of dead, bodies without number, people stumbling over corpse, all because of the wanton lust of a prostitute, alluring the mystery of sorceries, who enslaved nations by her prostitution and peoples by her witchcraft. So, you see why it'd be an interesting city to visit. And why would people want to go there? But God overlooked that in the time of Jonah. But now he's stepping up. They've gone a little bit too far. The prostitution and probably the witchcraft bothered him more than anything else. Because remember, even in when we read Acts, when Paul was on the island of Crete, they went to the last city. Can't think what it is right now, but they went. They had the guy who was mayor of that city had a guy who was performing magic, And so Paul had to step in, was still going by the name of Saul at that time. He had to step in and prove this guy was a phony and converted the mayor to Christianity. So witchcraft has been around forever.
Still around.
Yes, but it's not always called witchcraft. It's magic. You know, these guys who worked for the kings, they had the court jesters who just made the king laugh until they said the wrong joke and then off with his head. But they also had the wizards, or you know, what we would call today magicians. And
Politicians.
yeah, now they're politicians. Good, Bob. That's good.
Great.
But you know, God had a real problem with those people because they were leading people astray. That what God did wasn't by magic. It was through His own power.
Well, he sure is verbose, according to his name.
Yes.
A lot of adjectives, a lot of mean stuff.
Yeah. So let's pick up with verse 8.
Are you better than Thebes, situated on the Nile, with water around her? The river was her defense, the waters her wall. Cush and Egypt were her boundless strength. Put and Libya were her allies. Yet she was taken captive and went into exile. Her infants were dashed to pieces at the head of every street. Lots were cast for her nobles, and all her great men were put in chains. You too will become drunk. You will go into hiding and seek refuge from the enemy. All your fortresses are like fig trees with their first ripe fruit. When they are shaken, the figs fall into the mouth of the eater. Look at your troops. They are all women. The gates of your land are wide open to your enemies. Fire has consumed their bars. Draw water for the siege. Strengthen your defenses. Work the clay, tread the mortar, repair the brickwork. There the fire will devour you. The sword will cut you down, and like grasshoppers consume you. Multiply like grasshoppers, multiply like locusts. You have increased the number of your merchants till they are more than the stars of the sky. But like locusts, they strip the land and then fly away. Your guards are like locusts, your officials like swarms of locusts that settle in the walls on a cold day, but when the sun appears, they fly away and no one knows where. O King of Assyria, your shepherds slumber, your nobles lie down to rest. Your people are scattered on the mountains with no one to gather them. Nothing can heal your wound, your injury is fatal. Everyone who hears the news about you claps his hand at your fall, for who has not felt your endless cruelty?
Okay. So it's not necessarily the people God is unhappy with, but the ruler. Much, like our country today, whoever the ruler is, people are unhappy with him. I will say that your Bible's a little sexist.
I caught that and thought you might say something. What is your...
The New International Version said, look at your troops. They are all weaklings.
What verse was that?
Verse 13.
And yours says women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Look at your troops, they are all women.
And mine says wimps.
Yeah. I like the message is clear. It says, they're just a bunch of wimps.
Why didn't any of this reach the lectionary we have every 3 years?
I don't know.
Oh, that's
There's some passages there that
They read some of this stuff, they could wake a few people up.
Yeah.
I'll pelt you with dog dung.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
I can't see God,
see
I get into those words.
there's reference here to the fall of Egypt. You think you're superior to the Egyptian Thebes, proudly invincible on the river Nile, protected by the great river, walled in by the river, secure. Ethiopia stood guard to the south, Egypt to the north. Put and Libya, strong friends, were ready to step in and help. But you know what happened to her? The whole city was marched off in a refugee camp. Her babies were smashed to death in public view on the streets. Her prize leaders auctioned off. Her celebrities put in chain gangs. Expect the same treatment, Nineveh. You'll soon be staggering like a bunch of drunks. Things not looking good.
No.
But you think of the geography there, we're talking about clear down in Africa and Libya and clear up northeast to,
Yeah,
I mean, there's a more than a day's ride on a fast chariot.
yeah. Well, and you know, what's amazing is how fast information traveled. I mean, faster than the internet. But you know, everybody knew what happened in Egypt, and so the prophet is making a comparison to that.
Did they burn Egypt? I mean, the capital of Egypt, and is that when that great library was
No.
totally destroyed?
No, that-
Alexandria was burned, but not then, that was the Greeks.
you know,
Oh,
no, the library existed for quite a while.
Before this?
No, after.
No,
The
Alexandria the
Greeks
Great
were after this.
Yeah,
built Alexandria.
It seems to me if there was a headline for this, it would be "Don't get comfortable."
that's right. Yeah, don't think you've arrived. You know, you have.
That still hold true today.
Yeah. Don't think you're arrived, and everything is good.
It says Nineveh was never rebuilt.
Oh,
No,
really?
no, it just
Disappeared.
was gone.
did they just recently find ruins?
Yeah, they found part of the wall from
That's what I
Nineveh.
was thinking,
Yeah,
just recently.
Was that the Ishtar Gate? Is that Nineveh? The Ishtar Gate?
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I always find that fascinating when they find
Yeah.
ruins from some of these cities.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is they made a discovery in Iran.
I did learn about
You know,
the
you
Turtle Crescent
I can't imagine
in school.
universities sending archaeologists
Oh, yeah.
into Iran.
Didn't teach me a lot.
So when they make a find like that,
Everybody.
that's a big deal. And I would imagine that somehow that area gets cordoned off and nobody should bomb that area.
It's a good
But
map.
the problem is the Iranians then start putting stuff in that
Oh,
area.
yeah.
Can you send that to
So,
Oh, sure. I think.
what
She
is,
has a good map
oh,
of the Fertile Crescent. I mean,
oh,
Oh,
it's
I'm
it's
not
highlighted.
I'm not sure that, let me see, let me find.
Oh, well, you don't have to do it now.
No, I will here.
all right. We've beaten our way through another minor prophet. And we come to
Backup.
the prophet, I think is always interesting because when a lay reader has to read a lesson from that, they don't know. Saying Habakkuk is not easy.
But these don't pop up in the Sunday morning
No.
lessons
No.
very often.
I
No,
have a question. Do we know what happened to Nahum?
no.
Did he get destroyed in Nineveh, or?
You know, we know very, a lot of these minor prophets we know very little about. We know that you know, Nahum was he was an Elishite, Ekelshite, Yeah.
Just a minute, I'm getting there.
verse 1.
I'm trying to imagine where he
Elkosh.
gathers his
Hmm?
listeners. Or
Elkosh,
Okay.
Elkoshite.
And so we just kind of know where he was from, but we have no idea. And it's amazing to me that these prophets somehow survived.
yeah.
Somebody had to write those.
Yeah. And somebody, because there were hundreds of prophets. Somebody picked out the big 12 and said, you know, these guys,
Huh.
these are minor prophets.
I didn't mean to set you back. I just.
No, that's okay. because we're going to run into the same problem here with Habakkuk.
Yeah.
Habakkuk.
Oh,
You got an extra K in there,
Gotta
Habakkuk.
get some guttural stuff in there. Or-
You know, so I had a professor who said that in Hebrew, this had one of those words that made a sound that nobody who's English could repeat.
Can't do it.
He said it's kind of like the sound of a camel outside your tent while they were in heat.
Well,
And
that's a picture.
so none of us really tried to attempt.
Some of the African
What we've
languages, they can make these
Oh,
clicks.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like the,
Amazing to listen to.
well, I took Spanish. I had 4 years of Spanish in high school, and I could never roll my R's. I mean, I don't know how people.
The Spanish teachers I had at KU couldn't either.
Well, I had
Only one of them could.
my teacher was from Puerto Rico,
Oh,
so he could roll the R's, but you know, they're
It
just,
must be in each person's DNA,
Well-
what they can or can't. Like,
you know,
Babies can make all the sounds of any language there is initially. And they home in on the sounds that their parents are making, and that's the ones they really learn.
That they
But
hear.
initially, they can make any sound there is.
that sounds
That's so interesting.
logical.
so when I studied
It's just that
Chinese,
they get programmed by the language they hear from their parents.
when I studied
Make those
Chinese, the inflection was, you know, there, ma and ma, you know, they all mean different things. But basically, ma meant mother.
Oh,
And that's true in almost any language.
yeah.
Ma.
yeah.
But saying it with a different inflection meant something completely different. And, you know, as we're reading stuff, we're going very slow. But when the Chinese would say it, it would just slide
Oh,
right
yeah.
off their tongue.
Really
Well,
fast.
young children, because they still haven't lost all the ability to make all those sounds, can learn a second language far better than adults can.
Mhm.
Because they can learn the sounds, and
Yes.
the accent and that, which
And they can hear
you
those
lose all the
sounds.
time, the ability to do that if you don't work at it.
Unless, of course, you buy the program Babel.
Yeah.
You're advertised.
Yeah, I've had that and it didn't really help. What does the message say about Habakkuk? And I'm going to add that extra K in there.
Well,
Well,
it
there's
has
2 Ks,
about
Habakkuk.
4 paragraphs. Too much. I'm trying to pick out a good part. Habakkuk speaks our word to God. He gives voice to our bewilderment, articulates our puzzled attempts to make sense of things. He faces God with our disappointment with God. He insists that God pay attention to us, and he insists with a prophet's characteristic no-nonsense bluntness.
Mine says, there is little known about the prophet Habakkuk. He was likely a contemporary of Zephaniah, Jeremiah, and possibly even Ezekiel and Daniel, but none of the other prophets mention him. His name appears twice in the book, and he is clearly the main character. God commands Habakkuk to record the vision in chapter 2, and he probably also wrote chapter 3. In the apocryphal book Bel and the Dragon, Habakkuk is said to supply nourishment to Daniel when the latter was in the lion's den, but this work is not considered historically reliable. Bel and the Dragon is part of the Apocrypha. We read it a long
Right.
time ago, studied
Yeah.
it a long time ago, and it mentions Habakkuk.
And something took place that got him going, and it was in the 7th century BC.
Right. And that's the same time that we have Nahum, 7th
Yeah.
century.
But it does place him.
But it's interesting that from I just, you know, looking ahead, you know, our response to God, and this is really clear in the message. God, you're from eternity, aren't you? Holy God, we aren't going to die, are we? God, you chose Babylonians for your judgment work. Rock solid God, you gave them the job of discipline, but you can't be serious. You can't condone evil. So why don't you do something about this? Why are you silent now? This outrage, evil men swallowing up the righteous, and you stand around and watch.
Takes a lot of nerve.
Yes,
Ask God.
yes. That's why maybe he got that name, Habakkuk.
Right.
So, okay, let's start with chapter 1.
The oracle that Habakkuk the prophet received. How long, O Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous so that justice is perverted. Look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. Oh, this is the Lord's answer.
Yeah.
My Bible says, okay.
Mhm.
Look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. For I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. I am raising up the Babylonians, that ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwelling places not their own. They are a feared and dreaded people. They are a law unto themselves and promote their own honor. Their horses are swifter than leopards, fiercer than wolves at dusk. Their cavalry gallops headlong. Their horsemen come from afar. They fly like a vulture swooping to devour. They all come bent on violence. Their hordes advance like a desert wind and gather prisoners like sand. They deride kings and scoff at rulers. They laugh at all fortified cities. They build earthen ramps and capture them. Then they sweep past like the wind and go on. Guilty men whose own strength is their God. O Lord, are you not from everlasting?
Now let me just,
Okay,
this is Habakkuk's second complaint.
okay.
Okay.
O Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One, we will not die. O Lord, you have appointed them to execute judgment. O Rock, you have ordained them to punish. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrong. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? You have made man like a fish in the sea, like sea creatures that have no ruler. The wicked foe pulls all of them up with hooks. He catches them in his net. He gathers them up in his dragnet, and so he rejoices and is glad. Therefore he sacrifices to his net and burns incense to his dragnet. For by his net he lives in luxury and enjoys the choicest food. Is he to keep on emptying his net, destroying nations without mercy?
Okay. Does this remind you of any other book in the Old Testament? It's a 3-letter name.
Job.
Job.
Good clue.
Here we have Habakkuk complaining to God and God answering him. And the answer is interesting, I think. But it's not as interesting as the complaint. Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoings? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflicts abound. Therefore, the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous so that justice is perverted. The Message says, law and order fall to pieces. Justice is a joke. The wicked have the righteous hamstring and stand justice on its head.
Father, I have written down that the Chaldeans, they were the inventors of the crucifixion. Is that true, or did I just think it was neat and wrote it down. The Chaldeans. Uh-huh.
Well, I
They
imagine,
invented, crucifixion.
well, I don't know if you say invented, but they may have been among the first to do it.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, Rome wasn't certainly the first, but, you know, you look around and say, what are other countries doing?
They were very mean.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
Well, there were other instances, not like just in Israel, but where they were, it's like Turkey or somewhere like that,
hmm
and they were crucifying people,
yes,
and not in the distant past.
right,
They came up with very exotic ways to torture people, didn't they?
yeah. And the crucifixion, with the thing about crucifixion that we don't always think about is it's suffocation. Because when your hands are up like this and you're hanging, the chest cavity can't fill with air. And so you slowly suffocate to death, which is a very painful way to
Push
go.
themselves up on their feet to get a breath, but that hurt too.
Yes. So it really, if you look at people in those areas of what's now Iraq, Afghanistan, there was a lot of torturous ways to kill people. And they're doing it still today.
Well, they just didn't have guns yet.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, I'm not sure if
Guns
they
go
have.
fast, they want something slow and painful for a long time.
Whoa.
Yeah,
When I was out going around from port to port in the Navy, there was one stop and they talked about the prison. It's like a 12 or 13 story pit, and if the inmates start rioting and stuff, they open the floodgates and flood them, and the ones on the bottom die first, and then it goes up. And you hear about another thing is the inmates here in the United States, they got TV and air conditioning and stuff, you know, a little bit of rehabilitation, and they say, well, that's just kind of like going to a hotel room.
Yeah.
And overseas, it's hard. The family has to come in and bring you food.
yeah, yeah. You don't want to go to a Mexican prison.
No.
I mean, I learned that by watching The Closer.
Me too. It was just on like last night, summary run of that one.
Yeah. So, but man has found an unlimited number of ways to torture his fellow man.
Yeah.
And
Which is not what God intended.
no. I remember when I grew up in my hometown, we had a man who was in a Japanese prison camp, never talked about it.
Yeah.
He said, I don't want to talk about I hope you never have to see, because they were just cruel. Now, I assume Americans have done some of that bad stuff too.
My
Well,
son-in-law
all
was
the
in Iraq,
Japanese in America
and he never talks about it.
internment camps,
Yeah, we put them in internment camps, but we treated them decent in the camp.
more or less.
Well, they got 3 square a day. They all had a
but
place.
They lost their property, they
Well,
lost
yes.
their businesses, they lost everything.
But that wasn't nearly as bad as the American prisoners who were castrated
No,
by the Japanese.
Or waterboarding and some of those
yeah,
other
I mean,
things.
any prison is bad, but you can make any prison worse by taking it up a notch. So,
Well, a lot of your soldiers that come home never talked about what they seen or anything, never
Yeah.
said a word.
But as I was growing up, I never had any reason to understand that they may not talk about it, but the PTSD is there.
yes,
And
Yeah.
it changes their behavior. And
Yeah.
we're blaming it on alcohol or something.
yeah,
But there's a deeper
Yeah.
cause. for that.
I worked with a man out at Cessna, and his
PTSD.
was bad. And now my uncle, when he come home from World War II, the only thing he told us about was there was a little girl that they got kind of adopted and gave her candy and stuff like that. And that she had beautiful hair, and that's the only thing he ever told us about.
This isn't a torturous thing, but I had a cousin who came back. He and his brother were told by his dad, whatever you do, don't join the Marines. And they both went out that afternoon and joined the Marines. Well, the older brother came home and he had a tattoo on his arm, Betty. Unfortunately, his wife's name was Jane. So they ended up getting a divorce, and he was sitting in a bar one day, and some girl sat down next to him, and he said, "What's your name?" She said, "Betty." He said, "I've been waiting for you my whole life." And he ended up marrying her. So, you know, there are bad things that happen on both sides. I really like the way the message, you know, in the New International Version, the verse 17 is 2 lines long. It said, "Is he to keep on emptying his net, destroying nations without mercy?" But the Message, it is 6 lines long. "Are you going to let this go by? Let this go on and on? Will you let this Babylonian fisherman fish like a weekend angler, killing people as if they're nothing but fish?"
Yeah.
So, Babylonians, another name I like. I don't know why, I just like the way the letters lay on the page. Kind of like Assyria. All right, let's go through chapter 2.
I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me, and what answer I am to give to this complaint. Then the Lord replied, "Write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets, so that a herald may run with it. For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. See, he is puffed up. His desires are not upright, but the righteous will live by his faith. Indeed, wine betrays him. He is arrogant and never at rest, because he is as greedy as the grave, and like death is never satisfied. He gathers to himself all the nations and takes captive all the peoples. Will not all of them taunt him with ridicule and scorn, saying, 'Woe to him who piles up stolen goods and makes himself wealthy by extortion'? How long must this go on? Will not your debtors suddenly arise? Will they not wake up and make you tremble? Then you will become their victim, because you have plundered many nations. The peoples who are left will plunder you. For you have shed man's blood. You have destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Woe to him who builds his realm by unjust gain, to set his nest on high, to escape the clutches of ruin. You have plotted the ruin of many peoples, shaming your own house and forfeiting your life. The stones of the wall will cry out, and the beams of the woodwork will echo it. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and establishes a town by crime. Has not the Lord Almighty determined that the people's labor is only fuel for the fire, that the nations exhaust themselves for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Woe to him who gives drink to his neighbors, pouring it from the wineskin till they are drunk, so that he can gaze on their naked bodies. You will be filled with shame instead of glory. Now it is your turn. Drink and be exposed. The cup from the Lord's right hand is coming around to you, and disgrace will cover your glory. The violence you have done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, and your destruction of animals will terrify you. For you have shed man's blood. You have destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Of what value is an idol, since a man has carved it, or an image that teaches lies? For he who makes it trusts in his own creation. He makes idols that cannot speak. Woe to him who says to wood, come to life, or to lifeless stone, wake up. Can it give guidance? It is covered with gold and silver, there is no breath in it. But the Lord is in his holy temple, let all the earth be silent before him.
Last verse is famous, is
Yeah.
well known.
Yes, that's found in either morning or evening prayer as one of the opening sentences.
Well, at the very end, in parentheses, after the last sentence, it says, for congregational use with a full orchestra.
I see that. In mine, it's at the end of chapter 3, but you have it as a chapter.
Yeah, in chapter 3.
We used to sing that at the beginning of the service in
What?
Presbyterian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Lord is in his holy temple, let all the earth keep silence before him.
Well, I've heard the big musical, or kind of like the Messiah, but it's Elijah,
Mhm.
the prophet.
Yeah.
There's a big to-do about that, a big musical thing. We did that at KU. I mean, that just happened to be the big show for the year in the music department.
You know, as Barb read this passage, I kept, in my mind, I kept seeing some kind of parallel to words Christ shared. And maybe I'm reaching, but
What was that word you said? Christ what?
words that Christ shared.
Oh,
You know, in the gospel, like in verse 9, woe to him who builds his house by unjust gain. And I immediately thought of building your house on sand and no foundation. That same thing, the house is going to fall down. When he talks about the rocks, and it said, woe to him who gives drink to his neighbors, pouring in wineskins until they're drunk, so they can gaze on their naked bodies. And I thought, so fraternity parties were going on in biblical times. But it is interesting that the prophet is talking about orgies, which is what that would be. You know, you get people drunk and then have your way with them. So it's, who do you think you are, getting rich by stealing and extortion? You know, Jesus talked about that. Woe to him who piles up goods and makes himself wealthy by extortion. So there's a lot of Christian theology, I think, in the prophecy. So maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. But again, 3 years of seminary training and 52 years as an ordained minister, you're more than welcome to disagree.
Now, this wouldn't have been in the scrolls that they were reading in the synagogues in Jesus' time. These minor prophets wouldn't be in those books.
They probably, I imagine they didn't read much from the prophets at all in the synagogue, because those scrolls that they read from were the Torah, which are the first 5 books. So, you know.
They had the prophets, though.
Oh yeah, they had the prophets, but when they're reading from the Torah in the synagogue, they're reading from the Torah.
But I think then they had a second reading from the prophets or writing.
Well, they probably did, but it's not unlike what we do. We have an Old Testament reading, we have a New Testament reading or epistle, and we have the gospel. And if you talk to, I would assume most preachers, when you ask what do you preach on, the answer is the gospel.
Right.
You know, we don't, now I try to tie them all together somehow, sometimes it's impossible. I wonder how drunk these people were when they picked out the lectionary. But you know, if a kid is going up for his bar mitzvah, he's not reading from the prophets, he's reading from the
Yeah.
Torah.
Torah.
And so, you know, I'm sure they study the prophets, but I'm not sure they necessarily read it during worship.
Well, it's just as well.
Yeah, because, you know, reading from the prophets is like spanking yourself again. So, all right, we'll pick up with chapter 3 in 2 weeks.
In 2
Remember,
weeks.